Wonderful. Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm Allison Manley, the Director of Marketing here at Canopy Studios. And today we are hosting a webinar that's called Don't Panic! Drupal 7 still has life. As many of you know, of course, Canopy designs, builds, and supports websites for clients that want to make a positive impact. We do quite a bit of Drupal. And a bit about Anne, who is your host today. As founder and CEO of Canopy, Anne creates clarity around project needs, turns client conversations into actionable outcomes. She enjoys helping clients identify problems and then empowering the Canopy team to execute great solutions. She is a very big advocate for open source, and she co-organizes the Bay Area Drupal Camp, Bad Camp, which is coming up. So please sign up if you haven't yet. It's coming in October to a laptop near you. A reminder that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question for Anne, please enter it in there. And when she's done her presentation, I will run through the questions. It's only about a 15-minute presentation, so there's about 10 minutes left over for questions. So at this point, I will turn it over to Anne.
Okay, there's that mute button. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll go ahead and just dive right in here. So again, thanks for the introductions, Allison. At Canopy, we design, build, and support websites for clients that want to make an impact. And we really believe that your website should last for 10 years. As you focus on continuous improvements, we believe your website should look better at year 3 than it did on launch day. So we've worked with UCSF since 2013, and it's our mission to make websites easy to understand and effective. So by offering these trainings at UCSF, we're really hoping to power up all our cohorts. So let's dive in. Okay, so we have this summer series, and we have covered a couple of events already. And if you want to get recordings from any of these past events, let us know. We do have other ones coming up, including how to write inclusive content, how to do an effective content audit, website terms and definitions, and how to reorganize your navigation for success. So all of these are somewhat intertwined. So as you want to dig deeper into one thing, we have lots of topics that we can cover for you. Okay, so the agenda for today is we're going to take a quick dive and just look at the overall Drupal landscape. We're going to talk about the strengths of Drupal 7. We're going to talk about how to support your D7 site, and then how to actually plan for some next steps, because eventually we'll have to make that move, and we'll end with some Q&A. So let's go ahead and take a quick poll. Now, I was told that the polling item might show up underneath. Here we go. So if you might be able to see the poll now. If you don't, just move your window and it should be there. But the questions are we trying to stay on Drupal 7 for this fiscal year? We're trying to stay on this Drupal 7 for beyond, or we're planning to upgrade into Drupal 8.9 within the next fiscal. So we'll leave this open for another 20 seconds or so. And I just want to see who's all in the audience. So we've got half of you that's voted. So thank you so much. Feel free to continue to fill those out. And it looks like, very appropriately, over 50% of you are really trying to stay on Drupal 7 beyond this fiscal year. And I know that folks also, it looks like there's a few of you that are looking to stay on it until this fiscal year and then come up with a game plan. And then there's other people that are looking to upgrade. So this presentation will be very helpful to really understand what you can do now on your Drupal 7 site if you do want to maximize that life cycle, as well as what you can do now that's going to help minimize your technical debt as you move into the next version of Drupal. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so I'm going to close off the poll and we'll move on here. And I'll just share the results overall so you can take a look at that. All right, so the overall landscape, we'll just dive in. So first off, what does end of life really mean? And end of life means that there will be no more security or feature patches to that version of Drupal from the Drupal Association, from Drupal.org. There will be commercial support, which means an agency or multiple players that will actually provide extended features and patches and security patches. So we'll talk about that too. So there's so many versions of Drupal that are out there. So I just want to go over this landscape to get you folks familiar. And first off, there is Drupal 7 is end of life November 2022. But good news is that commercial support has been extended until 2024, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Drupal 8, on the other hand, is going to be end of life before Drupal 7 on November 2021. And the reason is because it's a dependency on Symfony 3. And this is an internal, it's a code that's there that's plugged into Drupal. So Drupal 9 is going to be released June 2020, or June, pardon me, Drupal 9 was released June 2020 with end of life June 2023. The biggest dependency on D9 is Symfony 4, which actually will have that end of life at 2023, which means Drupal 10 will be coming on June 22nd, or June 2020. And they've provided that full year to upgrade. We're going to talk about 7 and 8 and 9 as we go, and 10, but know that Drupal 7, if you're on Drupal 7, you have the longest timeline. So you have the most flexibility to do what you need to do now. You can see from this graph, by 2022, November, there will be that extended commercial support. We do expect to see that for Drupal 8, but we do want to be mindful that the 8 to 9 jump is a lot easier than the Drupal 7 to 8 jump. See, no reason to panic if you're on Drupal 7. So let's quickly touch base on some of the strengths of being on Drupal 7. First off, with nearly 9 years of life, many of the digital tools that you use to run your website will have solutions built for Drupal 7. Also, with the community of users and creators, there's vast amounts of documentation and resources for both developers and administrative users freely available online. And there's a lot of developer familiarity. Every Drupal developer was doing it the Drupal way until Drupal 7. Drupal 8 is a bit of a different, it focused on object-oriented programming. So there was a learning curve from 7 to 8 for your developers. So you're gonna have a bigger pool of developer talent that's familiar with Drupal 7. And it's still highly secure. So the Drupal security team really focuses on helping the community keeping Drupal 7 locked down. And what does this mean for UCSF? So at UCSF, you folks have the benefit of having centralized UCSF hosting on Acquia. If you're on the Acquia platform, that's one of those commercial providers that's going to be providing support until 2024. If you're not on the main UCSF infrastructure, maybe you're on Pantheon with a different site for whatever reasons, maybe not with the UCSF domain, that hosting provider, Pantheon, will also be providing that commercial support. So you're pretty much secure as long as you're on a solid Drupal hosting provider. Also at UCSF, what's beautiful is that ITS takes care of those regular security updates and backups. So that's all dialed in. If you're on a Drupal 7 site, you've got that already taken care of. Also, there's a site for everyone. So if you are currently looking to build a site, there's a web starter kit right now at UCSF that only exists in Drupal 7, but it's a nice plug and play kit that allows you as an end user to spin up a Drupal site and then just edit content and organize layout. There will be a plan for UCSF to migrate those 7 starter kits to 8 or 9 in the next year or 2. So you can jump on that 7 web starter kit if you don't already have a site, and know that you've got a plan to get out of there as well. Also, there's tons of great tools available to you folks at UCSF. You have tons of integrations, including My Access, profiles, publications, and the calendar. So if you're not taking advantage of these things on your Drupal 7 site, make sure that you contact ITS or you work with your web development team or your agency to make sure you can take advantage of these lovely integrations. Okay, so let's talk about what you can do now to your Drupal 7 site to support it. Specifically, we believe small bites equals big wins, and there's lots you can do on your Drupal 7 site that will carry forward. So when you're looking at your site and you think about what changes you can make now, we're going to talk about navigation, content, accessibility, SEO, and performance. But I also wanted to point out it's helpful to create a document where you can start putting your ideas and desires and start ranking them. And we like ranking them based on effort and impact. So we like smiley faces and colors. We feel that's very basic. And as you can see, green means low effort, medium, orange, medium effort, and high is red with 15+ hours of effort. And then we have the scale of some impact, plenty of impact or tons of impact. And you'll see that this throughout is a great tool to be able to just organize and get everybody on the same pages. Okay, let's talk a little bit about navigation strategy. The way you organize your content and structure it is key to helping your users find what they came for. So any work you do on your content strategy will be transferable to the next version of Drupal. So there's really no need to wait. Investing time into understanding your users and your users' journeys today will pay off big time when it comes to migrate. And once you have this data in hand, you can continue to iterate and grow, but it's going to create immediate impact. I wanted to show you a relevant UCSF example. So we built this site a long time ago. I think it was 2011, and it's Drupal 7. And the stakeholders really didn't want to spend the money or spend the time on doing a Drupal 8 replatform this fiscal year, and not next fiscal year either. So with this, what we did is we did some key research, and our findings were so impactful, and that we were able to create a better site now with less money and less time and get bigger results. What we did uncover is that the department always felt that it was really important to showcase their news. News, 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 news. It was always at the top of the page. It was always very predominant. What we found out is when we did our research is that patients are actually coming to find out more information and book an appointment, and students are wanting to see residency and fellowship programs. Nobody said anything about news. So what that allowed us to do was to create more pathways for the peoples. So just pulling this up, as you can see, oops, I'm at the bottom here, but we created a positioning statement, clarity and content. We created quick links where people were going all the time so they could quickly get there. And based on the hierarchy of the page, we've created this content and these pathways. So we were able to, with plain English, list off all the different types of patient care and allow them to then dig deeper right from the homepage. You'll see down here is the education component, and then lastly, the news. This was all taken from just starting with navigation and figuring out where the users want to go. Super powerful, super impactful. Okay, let's motor on. So content is essentially key to your success. It tells your end users who you are, why they should pay attention, and helps them get their questions answered. So performing a content audit to determine if your content is accurately representing your organization's culture, mission, and offerings is really important. So if you are curious about that, join our webinar about doing an effective content audit. But if you do that before you migrate, it's essentially cleaning your closets, organizing your kitchen stuff before you move. It's really knowing that when you are migrating, you're working with your highest value assets. Again, you can see that we recommend our content changes with that same scale. All right, I'm sure everybody's very aware of how multifaceted accessibility is. So an accessible approach is more than just about assistive technology. It's everything from the approachability and quality of your content to the predictability of your site's navigation and the underlying functionality that supports getting around with nothing more than a keyboard. So we've done a few accessibility talks, and I know that Jill has a ton of tools. You have a person that maybe, I don't know if they come on site this right now, but they're virtual, supporting doing testing. And this is stuff that if you can facilitate this work now, this type of stuff will carry over. And from an SEO standpoint, so search engines drive about 93% of all website traffic by an article of Omnicore that we found. And the point of that is that when 75% of those searches start on Google, and those searches, people really look at the first 5 results. That's over 67% of the clicks go to the first 5 results. So it's really important that you're well ranked. There's lots of things that you can do behind the scenes, and those things will continue to foster more SEO ranking as you go. We could do a whole webinar on this, but know that we can also email over some SEO tips and tricks and some other blogs of stuff that you can get done right away, which includes performance optimization. So from an SEO standpoint, Google likes new content. Google likes when your site goes fast, and Google likes when you have a mobile optimized version. So when we were looking at the comprehensive plan for a website, performance optimization is something that you can do now that's going to carry over and going to make your site more powerful. For example, images, a huge culprit. Often what you need to do is go and resize your images and make sure at the same time you get the right alt tags from an accessibility standpoint. You also want to make sure your redirect strategy is clean. Sometimes if you have an older Drupal 7 site, you may have redirects from your past migration from whatever you came from until Drupal 7. It would be skillful for you to go and look at all of those old redirects and start cleaning them up. And caching. Caching essentially makes your site go faster. And caching, what that is essentially taking a picture of your website and putting it out there. So if you don't already have caching set up or you don't know what that is, please work with John Keeley's team over at ITS or your web development team to make sure you have caching turned on. Because you really want to keep your site healthy, right? Which includes, you've got to remember your maintenance. We all live in a big city. We would never leave our car unlocked when you go downtown. You want to treat your website the same thing and make sure it's all locked down. Drupal 7 has everything available to you. And with being at UCSF, you have security updates that are taken care of and will be released right away and actioned. If you're not on Acquia, you will want to work with your development partner or someone that you know that you trust to be able to do those updates on a timely basis. You also want to think about minimizing your technical debt. Sometimes you come up with that big, great idea, and we want to figure out on Drupal 7, how do we actually implement that idea without over-engineering it? Sometimes there's ways to do stuff where with some clients, we have built certain things in Drupal 8 and popped them back into their Drupal 7 site and served that content there. So there's lots of creative problem solving ways that you can come up with building features on your website without obtaining more technical debt. And remember, it's totally okay to ask for help. There's lots of different agencies that are UCSF partners that can help you, but you really want to have someone that can help you make both good and tough decisions. Okay, so even with all these things going on, change is on the horizon. So with Drupal 7 nearing end of life after all, eventually you're going to need to migrate. You can stay on this again until 2024, but there will become a time. So if you think about your options, you could say, like, should I stay on Drupal 7? Yes, you could stay, and it's quite viable for quite some time. Regular maintenance and some love as you go will keep your site very healthy. I often tell our clients that it's okay to skip a version. A lot of our clients went from 6 to 8. A lot of our clients are going from 7 till 9. That's totally cool. Also, if you're thinking about Drupal 8, maybe it's because the features aren't available in Drupal 7. Or maybe it's because your department has the budget and you don't want to lose that and you want to get going. Or it may be that you feel like you have the capacity to take on the project. But what about Drupal 9? I'm sure everybody's curious, but the point is that Drupal 9 is essentially the same code base as Drupal 8 with the removal of deprecated code. And what that means is that code that was functioning on Drupal 8 with the Symfony, one of the core platforms that's part of Drupal, with that upgrade to Symfony, Drupal had to go and strip out all that old Symfony code and put the new Symfony code in, for example. So know that the big deal about Drupal 9 is it shouldn't be a big deal. Much more like our phone. It's like a push of a button when you go and you do an upgrade. That's the promise of Drupal 8 to 9 to 10. And in our early migrations, the promise is true. So that's very exciting. So once you get out of 7, you'll be in a solid place pretty much forever. So things to keep in mind as you're kind of thinking about this. Now remember, your end users have no clue, nor do they care if you're on Drupal 7 or 8 or 9 or WordPress or Sitecore. They don't know. They don't care. So know that there's no rush. But when you are thinking about what that looks like to migrate, you want to think about how complex your ecosystem is. Like most things you're managing, the more complex it is and the more extendable, you're going to need to start to understand all of those components so you can make it really easy to migrate. For example, what are the key functions of your site in context to the larger organization? For example, if you're a lab and you have your site on Drupal 7, but it's part of the department and the department's all on 7 and they have no intention of moving off of 7, as a lab, you probably have to wait for them. There's no way you can just do it on your own. Or you could, you just might be, a little rogue. It might be the other case if you have a Drupal 7 site and you have a bunch of lab sites that are, within that. If you're thinking about moving to Drupal 8, do you have the capacity to go and work with each of the labs to also migrate their sites at the same time? And making sure that you have the context of your site within the larger organization. Also, if there's a feature that isn't readily available, what's the effort to create it? So we work with the team over at OBGYN, and they have a basic site, lovely site. And when we come up with ideas on what to do, it's often like, well, how can we make it work within this? So if there is something that you think, oh, I really need this, most of it's available in Drupal 7, but if you may find that might be one of those tipping points that moves you to the next version. And also, let's think big picture about marketing. Things have changed drastically since COVID hit, and we've had to all pivot. And we don't like that wording. We're doing pivot. It's so 2020. But what we want to think is like, what's our 6-month plan, or even what's our 3-month plan? Are we going to be doing different types of things? Does that facilitate moving in towards a rebuild? Another thing to consider is the learning curve. Fortunately, Drupal to Drupal is fairly easy, but if your team is very comfortable and familiar with Drupal 7, it might be something to consider that it's okay to stay there for a little longer. And when you do decide to migrate, you want to think about change management. What other processes and tools will be affected? Will everybody be on board with the change? How are you going to train them all? And what does your long-term support plan look like? So when you're looking at extending the life of your Drupal 7 site, often you want to take into consideration, support and figuring out how much it takes to both manage your current site and migrate. So there's lots of things to consider and many paths one can take, but remember, your end users do not know. So you are essentially in the driver's seat based on your resources, which includes time, your team members' time, money, and energy to be able to move this forward. So we really think that Drupal 7 has a lot of legs and are a long life cycle. So if you need any other specific tips or tricks or any other advice on what we can do to help you keep momentum with your Drupal 7 site, please reach out. Okay, I talked for a little longer than I thought, so I keep checking my watch, but it's now time for questions.
Great.
We've got one from Sammy here.
Yes. So will the UCSF kits be available on Drupal 9?
That's a great question. So in talking with John and his team over at ITS, right now the UCSF web kit is on Drupal 7. And what they want to do is if you want to get onto that Drupal 7 site, they will probably skip 8 and go right to 9. So yes, it will be available on 9. There is some work that ITS needs to do to build that out. And they're probably gonna wait a little bit and migrate some of the custom sites that need to get migrated before end of life of Drupal 8. A great question.
Okay. So I'm curious, Anne, you've outlined the pros of staying on Drupal 7. Are there any cons to staying on Drupal 7?
It always comes down a little bit to dollars and cents, right? So there's being on Drupal 7, you've got a lot of life. I think the only downside is if you do have a little pocket of money right now, and you could get into Drupal 8, you could. It's definitely no harm in doing that. I don't think there's anything wrong with staying in Drupal 7 for 3 more years if you would like. It's just about the financial aspect of do you have enough money to be able to invest in a project. We find often sometimes if you're staying on Drupal 7, you then have the ability to create budgets 2 or 3 years down the road, because I know right now it's tricky to ask for money for these projects. So I don't think there's much of a downside to staying on Drupal 7, especially because your end users don't really know. It doesn't really impact whether you get applicants or whether you get new visitors to your website. It doesn't really matter. Good question.
Okay. And is there anything technically that anyone at UCSF will be missing out on by staying on D7 a little longer as opposed to upgrading to Drupal 8?
Not that I'm aware of. I believe that everything is really readily available in Drupal 7 because it's been available on the market in open source for so long. If anything, there's more things available in Drupal 7 than there is in Drupal 8. So what we often find is a client that's on Drupal 7 and they're considering migrating to 8. When we're doing an inventory of all the things that they have, we recognize there's still some community contributed modules that are not quite ready in 8. So we've been spending time helping with that. So I think that you're, you've got like a really robust toolkit when it comes to Drupal 7.
Okay. Then here's a question from Sammy. Are there any accessibility resources or workbooks to guide those who are doing a redesign?
Yes, and Jill Walters is going to be your go-to girl for those resources. I believe also that at UCSF, you have a tool called Site Improve, and Site Improve is something that you can run on your site and get back a report of all the things that you can fix. Definitely believe that if you're going to be going into a redesign, tackling content, accessibility, some of those changes on your Drupal 7 site is really, it's easier to digest sometimes. So we're working with the team over at the Helen Diller group there at cancer.ucsf.edu. They're not on Drupal. They're going to be coming on Drupal, but they're still doing the same things on their old site core site, which is parsing off old content, which is looking at all the images. So from a workbooks and guides, I think Jill's probably your go-to resource who can provide a bunch of other assets that are available to UCSF folks. Good question.
Okay, and then another thing I'm curious about, Anne, is it more expensive for people to wait to upgrade?
No, not necessarily. I think it gives you time to plan and save and organize budgets. It's again, if you have to do major feature development in order to accomplish some of your initiatives, you may want to consider a rebuild earlier. But generally, it's just about a website. If you build it, there's an initial investment up front, and then making it last 10 years, you're going to want to put iterative improvements and enhancements as you go. So I think just understanding that the cycle of a website should be 10 years, and that if you go to your boss or you're going to do financial planning, getting a chunk of money to do it, and then figuring out what that looks like, whether you stay on 7 for a couple more years and then switch, it's kind of six of one, half a dozen of the other. Good questions.
All right, are there any more questions? I know we're coming up on top of the half hour here. Oh, and then Jill did put her email address in there for reaching out to her on the topic of accessibility. So
fantastic.
Jill.Walters@ucsf.edu. Okay.
Wonderful.
So we do have 4 more sessions the next every other Wednesday. These are the ones coming up. Let us know if you are interested in joining those. Thank you all for joining this one. We will be sending out a recording and the deck of this webinar in probably by end of day tomorrow if you want to review it or share it with others. And as of course a reminder, Canopy would love to help you with your site if you need it. So please email us at hello@canopy.com if you're interested. And that's a wrap for today. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
It was nice to see everybody virtually. I hope to see you all in person. We used to do these as lunch and learns where we get tacos. So as soon as that's available, we'll be back to the tacos. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you.